want to talk about the life and the legacy of Langston Hughes, to share his life, because through our history, we understand where we come from as a people, and Langston's life was very inspirational. So my goal tonight, and what I hope to do here with you tonight, is to inspire you, Blue Island, to inform you about Langston Hughes, the poet, the man, the writer, the columnist. And I hope to invoke faith and belief in you, that you too can fulfill the dreams that you have. If Langston could do it, who grew up with his father abandoning him and his mother primarily raising him and his grandmother raising him, with all of the trials and tribulations, he still persevered, and we'll talk more about that. But he's inspirational. And that's what I hope, that after you see and hear more about Langston, that you will leave here inspired and motivated to carry out your dreams and your goals and the visions for your life. I also like to recognize my husband. He popped in here. If you would just say, hey, I'm here. So I have a PowerPoint, and I'd like to, and I'm going to also share a 10-minute YouTube video, and it should be loud enough, and I may cut it off. It depends on how interested we are in it. Okay? So we're going to talk about Langston Hughes. And the second slide talks about his entire name. His entire name was James Mercer Langston. Born in 1902 to James Nathaniel Hughes and Caroline, often referred to as Carrie Mercer Langston. And Langston Hughes was born in Joplin, Missouri. Who was Langston Hughes? He was an African-American poet, a social activist, a novelist, a playwright, a columnist. He was also one of the earliest innovators of the then new literary art form called jazz poetry. And now I would like to share with you the link of the 10-minute link that really goes into detail talking about Langston's life. While it's coming up, I'm going to continue to share with you the genealogy of Langston Hughes's life. He comes from a long lineage over several continents. His mother, Carrie, had French descent. Her father was from France, and his father had Scottish descent and Jewish descent. And from a very young age, Langston was exposed to social and civic activism. Influences stemmed from his family lineage. His lineage was very prominent, culturally diverse, and well-educated politically. And his lineage linked him to his history throughout the world.
Langston Hughes was born, the second child to Carrie Langston and James Hughes in Joplin, Missouri.
So as I was talking about Langston's genealogy, Caroline, his mom, her father's name was Charles, and her father's brothers were Gideon and John Langston. And John Mercer Langston is the reason that we have Langston University in Oklahoma. Langston University is named after Langston Hughes' great uncle, his mom's father's brother. Not only did John Mercer Langston name Langston University, but Howard University Law School was also, he founded Howard University Law School. He was also, his grand uncle He was also the first congressman out of Virginia. So you can see that his mother's father's brother really inspired Langston Hughes to become socially active. This is where I would argue that Langston got a lot of his political thought, what made him think about some of the poems that he wrote about. As we continue to look at Langston Hughes, I want to move into talking about the Harlem Renaissance, which he was a large part of the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes' prolific and expressive writings, he was a genius, translated the genealogical influences of his lineage only to make him one of the greatest contributors to the Harlem Renaissance era of African American writing, poetry, and publishing. Langston Hughes wrote about three major categories: political, racial, and for children. Langston's work was also encompassed popular, lyrical, and controversial political movements. Langston Hughes utilized his talents of American language, music, religious viewpoints, and slang to educate the masses about real life in African American experience during the Harlem Renaissance. His criticisms mainly focused on the socio-economic divide and prejudices based off of skin color within the Black America. For example, African Americans, other poets, disagreed with Langston Hughes' use of, for example, the words ain't. And like, for example, I'm going to recite one of his poems, Mother to Son, before we end tonight. So he would use a soulful, historical slavery terms. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. But people like James Baldwin criticized Langston for using those terms. Basically said, you've been educated, yet you're not using the English language correctly. So one could admire Langston Hughes for being himself and not allowing his critics to dictate who he was, and he kept his identity, and he wrote the way he was inspired to write. So Hughes was very socially active. The Great Depression brought about an end to the Harlem Renaissance era and African American literary works explosion. Like most African Americans during the 1930s, Langston's interest and involvement in radical politics and American Communist Party was prompted by racial inequality and disenfranchisement. Hughes had lived through 2 world wars, which he radically addresses within his writings about war, Jim Crow, and blind justice. So now I would like to talk with you about an analysis that was written about the 2 poems in which I will share with you tonight. I will actually read I Too, and I will read Mother to Son. But prior to sharing those poems with you, I would like to share with you an analogy of what inspired Langston Hughes to write these 2 poems. James Mercer Langston Hughes always sought ways to broaden his audience's experience while fully representing himself as a self-conscious Black poet. However, this gave cause for him to wonder if The African American tradition of artistic expression was outside the conventional boundaries of poetry. By looking to his African American mixed culture heritage, remember I talked about on his mother's side there was French, and on his father's side there was Scottish. So that mixed culture heritage inspired him, and not rejecting any symbols of a racial poetic identity prompted two works which speaks to the relationship and advice given from a mother to her son, and to the contentious struggle for inclusion in America. On September 24th in 2016, the New York Times writes an article about the new Smithsonian National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. This beautiful space was built to include all audiences. And in the spirit of this beautiful building being built to include all audiences, what better poem to use than Langston Hughes' poem, I Too? The message from I Too powerfully declares the African American story to be an American story, as central to the country's narrative as any other. And understanding Black history and culture is essential to understanding American history and culture. I Too, from the perspective of either an African American man, a slave, a man in the Jim Crow South, or even a domestic servant. The lack of a concrete identity or historical context does not mitigate the poem's message. In fact, it confers on it high degree of universality. For the situation Hughes describes in the poem reflects a common experience for many African Americans during his time. The poem begins by declaring that he too can sing America, meaning that he is claiming his right to feel patriotic toward America, even though he's a DACA brother who cannot sit at the table and must eat in the kitchen. This alludes to the common practice of racial segregation during the 20th century when African Americans faced discrimination in nearly every aspect of their lives. African Americans were forced to live, work, eat, travel separately from their white counterparts. Few had civil or legal rights and were often victims of racial violence and faced economic marginalization on both the North and the South. The invocation of America is important for Hughes. His belief that African Americans are valuable, a valuable part of the fabric that makes America great, as is the inclusion of all within the population. The opening lines to I Too are illustrative. W.E.B. Du Bois said, the theory of double consciousness he spoke of, and I quote, "It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One ever feels his two-ness and American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warrings, ideals in one dark body, whose dog strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. W.E.B. Du Bois. I will now recite for you. But prior to reciting for you, I just want to share with you just a few words about the mother-to-son poem. Hughes had just began his career as a poet, and he wrote this mother-to-son poem. And in this poem, he's frustrated with the impossible task of writing poetry that truly speaks to and for the African American experience. The mother teaches her son not to abandon tradition in order to write poetry. All poetry, she states, doesn't have to be beautiful like a crystal stair. It can reveal truths that are painful like tacks and splinters and ugly places with no carpet on the floor. It doesn't have to conform to so-called white customs. It can be bare, yet, if needed be. Do not ignore those customs or conventions, especially if they can be of use. And now I will share with you the two poems. I will share with you first I Too, which is placed at the famous, most recently built African American Museum in Washington, D.C. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Thank you. The final point. Well, son, I tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all the time I've been climbing on and reaching landings and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back now. Don't you sit down on the steps because you finds it kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I's a still going, honey. I's a still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Thank you.